Hello, this is Photography Gamer. Welcome back to the channel. This is an episode of the VP guide. If you haven't seen this guide, I basically talk you through photo modes in video games. I'm a professional photographer as well as being a YouTuber. I haven't done an episode in a while, but today I'm having a look at a game. It's called Cairn. It's a climbing game with survival elements and it's got a photo mode. So here we go. So we pause the game, we can move the camera. We're using the joystick controller, the Xbox controller on the PC version here. So using the both sticks we can move them around. We can use the triggers to do craning, which raises the camera up and down like so. As you can see, it's quite a picturesque environment, so we can do that. Let's reset that and let's come back down. So X hides your UI if you want to, take a photograph with the screenshot button. Y resets. Quits is the B button, and the screenshot is the picture-in-picture mode, which we've just taken a screenshot there on Steam. Now in the camera settings we've got controls, so we've got different options for controls, which basically presets the camera. So we've got panoramic. I think there's portrait, shoulder. All of these options give you like a good starting point, or we can just use free. Then we've got tilting. Tilting is good for creating a sense of dynamic movement, action. Obviously, if you were in the middle of a climb, the tilting option would definitely be something that would help. Camera speed. This dictates how fast the camera is going to move with your joystick. So if you want fine movement, you can use that. You've got frames. That's an option there for a cinematic framing. Anyway, let's go on to the lens section. Macro portrait. This is again another sort of preset type thing where it changes the field of view and the focus and the aperture and all of the elements we're going to look at. Here, field of view, essentially it's like a zooming function, but if you zoom too close or too far, there will be slight skewing on the borders of the image because it will distort. Focus distance is obviously self-explanatory. Where do you want the focus to originate? So you probably want it where your subject is. Aperture, well, let's see. So the lower the aperture, the more blur. The higher the aperture, the less blur. Then we have focal length. What does this do? I mean, focal length really means it's different when you're talking about an actual camera, but it seems like it's similar to focus distance in this photo mode. So the focal length, maybe that's something you should choose before you start messing with the aperture and the focus distance. Anyway, let's recompose this because it's all a bit messy. Right, we're going on to the next tab, environment. Use the bumpers, by the way, the LBRB buttons to switch tabs. Time of day. This is obviously great if you want to change the atmosphere and the temperature of your image. Got some nice sky at night there. Sunrise, very pink. So really nice colourful options we've got there. Then you've got weather. Weather will, again, not just, it will change the weather, but it will change the temperature, will change the feel of the image. So, time of day and weather are something you should work with, along with the filters, which we'll go into in a moment. We can also select the display route, but, you don't really want that in a photograph unless you're doing a sort of a technical photo. Next is people. So we've got robot display. You've got a little robot buddy behind you. Do you want him on? Do you want him off? The light stick, that could be good if it's getting dark and you need to add a little bit of shadow. That's an option. Then we've got the posture of the main character. But first, let's change the time of day. Get it into a portrait. Right, let's get back to where we were. So you can change the posture, as you can see. It does change the focus. So this is... bear with me 1 second, we want to get it in focus. So we've got available postures for our main character. So this is good if you want to create different feelings and different atmospheres and different types of shots, sitting down, climbing, sleeping, etc. We can alter the facial expression. I never really use these that often because they always look a bit dumb. Again, if we move the camera, we've got to change all the settings. So this is a bit annoying, but yeah. There's facial expression options. We can turn the character off. Maybe you would like to do an environmental photograph without your character, landscape photography, for example. Anyway, we can offset the character's position, like left, right, up, down, we can do all sorts. These are really good fun, so you could have a lot of fun with these sort of, like how you want to move your character around. So those are the basic 3. Then you go down to rotation, and you can like rotate them like all sorts of different ways, which, you know, that could lead to some interesting use in taking photographs. What does the other one do? That's just standard rotation, left right rotation. And then we've got this one, which is I don't know how, if we'd actually use that, but it's kind of nice to have that option. Then finally it's effects. So we've got filters. There's a few, you know, usual. We've got a nice little painted one there, like a little watercolor. Some of these probably are impractical, but you know, they're there. There's no slider for the filter, so you can't change the intensity, which is slightly annoying. Then we've got brightness, contrast. Brightness, obviously, if you need to just bump up the levels in the whole image. Contrast is more about the definition between the light and the dark. You know, do you want it cloudy? Do you want it very crisp? And then you've got gamma. Gamma has a similar feel to brightness, but it kind of does a bit more. It's just in certain levels it's working, so it's not that different to brightness. Bloom is what, you know, it's like a sort of a Vaseline lens effect. It's a kind of a washed out, dreamy watercolor feel. Then look, if we apply different weather and different times of day, see how that bloom creates a really nice sort of glow. You don't have to have it on, but look, you know, we put it up there. Look at that. It's very nice for sunsets. We can add grain. Grain will just add a bit of texture to your image, which you might need sometimes just to define elements. Grain size is an option as well. Vignetting. The whole point of a vignette is if you're doing a centrally focused thing, or you want to just tidy up the borders so that they're not distracting. Here is obviously lens distortion. I wouldn't particularly say that's very useful. Color distortion, that's chromatic aberration. That puts a border around the edges where it goes sort of, if you can see, blurry, almost like 3D effect on the borders of the elements. And yeah, that's the photo mode. Those are the settings. So that's just a quick look through them. Now I'd say those settings are pretty good. It is a bit fiddly, like you do have to kind of compose and frame your shot before you take the photograph, or before you start pissing around with all of the elements, because you know, once you start moving the camera, you've got to redo the focus. So try and make sure you get your right composition and distance and framing before you start doing the focal elements. Otherwise you're just going to double handle everything. Anyway, why don't we take a photograph? So let's have a little look about. This is on Steam, by the way. This is not the full game. This game's coming out soon. This is the demo, so I would encourage you to have a look at the demo because it's pretty difficult. This is not like Jusson, which is another climbing game I really liked, but this is very, very difficult. So let's try and climb a little bit and try and take a photograph of us climbing up the mountain. So let's get a foothold and reach out, and let's do the photo mode. So how you want to take these pictures, obviously if you're climbing a large rock wall, you've only got 50% of the area you can go to with your camera, because you can't go beyond the wall. So it is like you have to think about the body position, you've got to think about the wall, the time of day, the weather conditions. I think could definitely make this more interesting. Even like these rotation elements, although some of these rotation elements could look a bit strange, but you could play around with your character's position, get them in a composition that works for something like reaching out for something or that. But yeah, I'd say first thing, do a bit of composition, then you want to do the weather, then you want to do the time of day. And then once you've done all these things and you've composed it, then start dealing with the focus. Like that's quite nice. You've got rain, you've got fog. Maybe we need to recompose the position of our character so that she's kind of in the climbing position. As you can see, it's nighttime. I've put that light on the character's backpack. That just gives, because without that light, let's be honest, we wouldn't see a lot. Right, I've abandoned that one because it wasn't really happening. So I think we need to get a slightly different angle. I think this is going to be good for photos, but I think it's not going to be the sort of game you're going to take loads of photographs in, because it's going to be quite hard to do the composition correctly. But I think if you get it right, it could be some really beautiful. So what we want to do, I think what we want to do is try and get something with a lot of fog and mist and really almost like early morning sunrise or sunset type of climbing vibes. So maybe we want to get the character's face. We're going to go super tight. Let's do a tight portrait first, and then we can, once we've got the composition and all the elements color wise happy like with that, we can then cut out. So what are we going to do? We'll use the light stick. We'll use the light stick and we'll just have the character by the wall. We're going to need to change this composition unless we can move the character, but obviously you don't want to go into the wall. But you can see how these elements are very useful already. But obviously you don't want your hand inside the rocks, do you? So they're just things that give you an option to sort of play around with. Right, I think what should we do with the weather? The fog's quite interesting. Maybe it's a bit washed out. Let's put a filter on it. What should we do? I think it needs a bit more contrast because of the fog. Maybe the brightness down. Bloom, you can see how the bloom, but now I feel that's a bit too blue. So how can we remedy the blue? What can we do? Let's have a look. We can change time of day. And look, you can see wild variation, depending on the time of day, because it's all color toning, isn't it? Like the time of day is also almost like a color filter. That's quite nice. That's like very all the rage now, isn't it? The purple and pink stuff. Bumping up the bloom. The bloom is lightening up the darker areas, isn't it? And all of that light, where's that light coming from? It's coming from the torch on your backpack. Without that, this would be a very dark image. So again, the light on your backpack with some bloom really has a nice effect. Anyway, let's cut in, and we just want to do a nice little close portrait, and then I think we'll take this shot like to a wider angle, and then we can do like almost like a landscape vibe in the fog with the pink, because it's kind of a nice light, isn't it? So we just play around with the bit of tilting, a bit of focus distance, and I think that one's not too bad. Just get the framing just about right. We'll take a picture of that one. So that's a nice tight portrait of our climber. Now, do we want to do a wider shot? So these are the controls. If we flick through the control bit on the camera, it will sort of preset views. See that? Like different views. Obviously some, like this one, doesn't really work that well. That's kind of interesting. Look at that. It's like you can see our character and the light and the rain and all the fog. It's very beautiful and atmospheric, but it's kind of mysterious. Like, where are we? We don't know what kind of mountain we're on. I like that, but we need to define the focus, which we're doing now. Even though blurry, it looks good, but like I think we need a little bit of focus there. But that's an interesting image in itself. So we'll take a picture of that. Now we can change time of day again. See, look at the color variations. Again, pinks, greens, blues, darks, thunderstorm. Look at that. That's really interesting. There you go. Dawn, fog with the pink. Look at that. That's very, it's washed out, but it's very interesting because it makes you think about, oh, what's there? What's going on in that environment? So yeah, I'd say there's a lot of options with this photo mode. I like it. I'd be interested to play the full game, see how big the mountain is, how many variations of the environment there are, because I think you could take some really delightful photographs in it. I mean, just look at these. Again, there's another variation on it. Slightly darker, but more moody, more atmosphere. That's another interesting one, isn't it? So again, once you've done the initial composition and the initial color toning and the initial elements, that doesn't mean it's the end of the photograph. You can then do more. You can change the time of day, you can change the weather, you can turn the light on or off. That light really has made this image worth taking, because without that light, it'd be very difficult. Anyway, well, my leg's got the shakes, better come down. So there you go. That is Cairn. It's a demo on Steam right now. It's a very cool little game, regardless of the photo mode, but It's got a really nice photo mode. I can't speak, I need a coffee. Give the photo mode a go on the free demo, but it's also a game that I think a lot of people would like. It's kind of peaceful but quite challenging. If you've got any questions about photography, VP guides, photo modes, video game photography, this video, etc., send me a comment and I will help. But until next time, this is Photography Gamer signing off. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I will catch up with you another time with another game. Thank you.